Hey everyone.
Hey there, folks.
This is Amanda.
This is Rita.
And you're listening to
I Don't Know Her,
the podcast where we talk about women.
And some other folks.
Who you've probably never heard of.
But you should have, and today you will.
Definitely. We both want to quit our jobs.
We're kind of over it. We're fucking done.
Why don't you talk first about what's eating at your bones?
Oh, all of it. Okay, so probably if you're aware that we're moving into phase 2 here in Spokane. I mean, if you're from Spokane. And that means that, I work in a restaurant and that we are going to have indoor dining again. And things have been good. A lot of people have been very kind. A lot of people have not. And
I'm shocked to hear that.
I'm scared because I don't know how it's going to be because things are not going to be the same. Everyone says going back to normal, all this stuff. There is no normal anymore. That was how things were. And now there's how things are now. And it's going to be different moving forward. And so, no, it's not going back to something. It's learning how to function in this whole new way. And as being a server, as long as I have, I didn't sign up for this new way. And so now things are tense. And I find myself getting shorter and shorter. And the people working around me getting shorter and shorter. The customers around me getting shorter and shorter. And so I'm just like, do I not even want to do this anymore? Like, I want to go somewhere else. I want to do something else.
I'm feeling that too. I'm like, what are my options? What does a queer non-binary person who's moderately talented at writing and podcasting and knows a lot about feminism and pop culture do? That makes a real salary and has benefits.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you've got a little bit more to lose with that one than I do.
You mean there's nothing? there's nothing out there for me? Okay, so I guess I'll just stay what I'm doing.
Yeah, same. I'm like, I don't know what else I could possibly be doing or if there's anything even available to possibly be doing.
Yeah, it's, I know, especially right now, like there's just not as much to do. I was thinking about, like working for a company like Scholastic and selling books.
That'd be cool.
Or, working for like a curriculum company and writing curriculum because I'm really good at that. But like, those don't sound like a lot of passion for me.
Yeah, it'd be a job.
Yeah, my situation at work is that I just feel like I've been saying the same things and fighting the same battles. And I've been working in this particular district for 8 years. And nothing has changed in those 8 years, not truly changed. The only things that have truly changed have been because of state law changing. Nothing that I could say that was a victory. And this week, it's Black History Month. It's February. And Black History Month is every month to me and to our podcast. As you know, if you've been a listener for any length of time, you know that we regularly do Black folks as our subject matter, and we don't relegate it to 1 month out of the year. But as a school person, like I would say I'd always promote Black authors in the library, but I do, a spotlight, a special
highlight,
a special thing for Black History Month, and I have every year that I've been a librarian. And this year I decided it would also be when I was going to try to do my best to like ramp up interest in the library. So I've been like super active on Instagram, and we've made lots of posters and slides for our digital billboards. And one of the posters / slides I made was the image of a whole bunch of different, like children's fists, like young people's fists in the air, like solidarity. And the one in front is a black fist, but the others, it's a black and white photo, so you can't really tell, but the others are all light-skinned or white. And I purposely chose that image because I was like, it's multiple races. Everybody can be like, yay, we're in this together. And the poster itself said, "Honor Black lives, read Black stories."
Okay.
Because I'm highlighting books that are like everything from, science fiction to Rosa Parks. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I literally meant the entirety of people's lives. Not just Martin Luther King or, the guys that you've all heard of before, but also, hey, let's read this new sci-fi book by Alicia Dow, who's a new Black writer. How about the newest book by Angie Thomas, which is a prequel to her #1 best-selling book, The Hate You Give? Like, let's honor the entirety of Black lives, past, present, and hopefully future. And that was too political.
Okay. You said the school removed it, right?
Yeah, the principal went around and
Too political.
removed all of the honor Black lives, read Black stories. Because I guess promoting reading Black stories
It's too scary.
It's too political. And I made the posters, but I'm not the one who put them up. One of our Black students put it up.
Mm-hmm. So what does that tell them?
Exactly. What does that say? Their life isn't worth honoring. That's what that fucking says.
Mm-hmm.
And I was heartbroken and furious yesterday. I still am. Both of those things. And it was really infuriating because he was like, well, Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter stuff, like, those are political statements. I was like, it doesn't say that.
It doesn't say that anywhere.
It doesn't say that. I said, it says honor Black lives, not Black Lives Matter. He was like, well, it's the same thing. I was like, it is not the same thing. And even if it were, whatever, I would agree that it's, and I said, I don't think it's inherently political to say Black Lives Matter. And he was like, I know you don't.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't. I don't think it should be. To me, it's the same as saying Black people should have rights.
Yeah.
To me, that's not a controversial statement.
No, not at all.
And the people who have deemed such a statement controversial are racist.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're trying to create some school culture that feels accepting and inclusive, then Black Lives Matter should not be a controversial statement.
Mm-mm.
And certainly honoring Black lives by reading Black stories is not controversial. It is not political.
If that makes you uncomfortable, something's wrong with you.
That's exactly right. If it makes you uncomfortable, you need to sit with that.
Yeah.
This is not my fucking problem, and it's certainly not any of our Black kids' problems.
Mm-hmm. They deserve a place at the table too, every day.
Every single day. And especially during Black History Month. Come on, give me a fucking break. I am furious about it. I have had 24 hours, more than 24 hours to try to calm down about it, and I'm not calm. I'm never going to be calm about it.
Mm-mm. That's because it's never okay. You know it's not okay.
It's not. It's just not okay to me. And I think their reasoning was garbage.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I think the real reason is that there was another poster, a mock of mine, that had been created by someone and put up, I don't know how many, I don't know where, but it looked just like mine.
Mm-hmm.
And it said something about either BLM or Black Lives being fascist. Oh yeah, if you're not up on this is a very common refrain / tactic among these alt-right white supremacist memes.
Mm-hmm.
That things like Black Lives Matter is fascist. It's obviously that they don't have any idea what fascism means because they're fucking morons, obviously. But that it's common. Like when we were doing stuff for the GSA, when we had posters promoting coming out and whatever, they did mock-ups of those too and saying stupid shit about gay rights being fascist or something.
What?
It has something to do with like everything being shoved down their throats. And I'm like, if you have a problem with blowjobs, that's your problem, not my problem.
Yeah.
I'm being facetious there, but it's stupid.
They have a $10 word that they think they know how they're wielding it, and they don't.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah, it's that hot button word, and
because because we all know that Hitler really loved. Hitler really loved gay and black people. That was like on his top of the list.
He didn't hurt any of them at all.
No, it wasn't a problem for him.
Okay, if we quit our jobs, what are we going to do? 'Cause we're obviously going to do this together.
A feminist commune.
Yes, I would be down for that. I would grow so much shit.
You would grow stuff and build stuff, and I would teach, and we would read and have book clubs.
I would totally do that.
We'd have lots of cats.
I would be so down for that.
And dogs.
Cat farm.
Maybe some chickens for my wife.
Yeah, these times right now, I'm also feeling a very heavy weight in the air of this, almost with a lot of white people that I do know, a lot of my white friends, of that everything's fine now.
Yeah.
Biden saved us all. And, it's like there's still so much work to be done, and I still don't feel safe, and no, it's not okay. And things are still very scary. And it scares me that now you feel comfortable and I'm still terrified.
I can't even fathom why you would feel like we don't still have an entire mountain to climb.
Yeah.
Like it just...
And not all people feel that way, but the people that do, it makes me scared because it creates complacency, which creates a lack of motivation to continue to change things.
Yeah. You can't... If there's anything the last 5 years have taught us, it's that you cannot take any progress for granted, because the next day we could regress a decade with one small action. And I don't plan on moving backwards, so I'm going to continue to push forward. And there's no such thing as gender justice, racial justice, economic justice without the other. You can't have economic justice without racial justice. You can't have gender justice without racial justice. Those go hand in hand. So if something you want in your life is to feel like you're accepted as a white gay person, then you better be on the front lines, marching in every single BLM march, because without racial justice, there is no gender and sexuality justice.
Yep.
It's just a veneer. Gay marriage rights, that's a veneer. Of course it actually helped real people, right? I'm one of the people who benefited from that. But it still didn't guarantee that I wouldn't get kicked out of my housing or fired from my job. It was something that, wealthy, secure, white folks could go out and do that benefited them, but they didn't have anything to lose. And that's a problem. Like, you really do. Because any of that stuff can be wiped away from you in a heartbeat.
I had a very interesting conversation with a Black woman that I'm friends with. And she asked me, what would you do if you were white for a day? And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah. She's like, think about it. What would you do? And I was like, am I still brown on the inside? Like, do I still have a brown brain? She's like, yeah. She's like, I still have a black brain. You still have a brown brain. What would you do? She was like, I would freaking trespass somewhere. Like that. Cause she's like, I know I would have no consequences. I wouldn't get in trouble. Like, that was the first thing. Like, we were trying to think of like, what did we think we could do if we were white? And I was like, that question boggled me. But it was interesting sitting there talking with somebody about that.
Yeah. Did I ever tell you about when I went to World Pride in New York City? And I was with my friend Elio, I was with Elio and his friends, and all of them were people of color. And we're all queer, right? It's Pride. And we went to this place that he had gone to in Pride's past. And so he knew the rules and stuff like that. And it was like, they don't take reservations on Pride Day, obviously, but they're right on the route. And they have a patio that's right on the route. So it's like a coveted spot. You have to get in line well before they open to be able to secure a spot. So he got there, like Pride starts at, I don't even remember, noon. And they open, I think Pride actually started at like 1, but they opened at like 11. He was in line by like 7:30 in the morning.
Oh my goodness.
He was like 3rd or 4th in line. And so he
wanted that spot.
Yeah. And so he got down there and got us a spot. We all joined. And like, I think we got there at like 9 a.m. So we were also in line with him for a good long time. And so when they opened, they seated us on the patio and like, that's our spot, right? Like, that's why you get there hours early. And he did the same thing the year before. And he was like, there was no problem. We stayed there the whole day. We drank, we had fun, we ate. And we got there and we got our table. We had our brunch, which had bottomless margaritas.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was a problem. And we then they transitioned to like, okay, we're no longer serving brunch because it's about to be, the parade time and things are ramping up. And suddenly they were like, there are reservations and you need to leave. And Elliot was like, no. I've been here before. That is not how this works. Like, you get to stay here the whole day. And they were like, no, not this year. We're doing reservations and you need to leave. And he was like, well, I'm not fucking leaving.
Oh.
I've been here for, 5 hours to get this spot and I'm not leaving. And I mean, we're all obviously like, we're 2 pitchers of margaritas in. No, 4 pitchers of margaritas
Feel a little brave.
And eventually, like, they were like trying to get us out so hard. And Elio just turns to me and he was like, turn on that whiteness. Get out of get us out of the situation. Demand to see the manager. Do your care and best. And I was like, okay. And I was just like, can I speak to your manager?
Oh no.
And like the manager came and I was like, listen, my friend is from here. He does this every year. He comes to this restaurant. Like, we're paying, we're still buying food, we're still buying drinks. Like, I don't see the problem. And he was like, well, we have reservations. And I said, but you've never had reservations before. You didn't announce that when we arrived. We don't have a reason to leave. We're still patronizing your business. And he eventually just walked away. And Elio was like, that's not how that would have gone for me. And I was like, you're right.
Yeah.
I know that you're right. But he was like, weaponize it for good. And I was like, all right, I'm doing it. I wouldn't necessarily classify that for the good now when I'm not 4 margarita pitchers in, a whole pitcher to myself. But man, like, that seemed real shady to me.
Yeah.
Because there was a whole table of white gay men behind us. They were not telling them to leave.
Interesting.
They had reservations, he said.
Yikes.
And we were like, I don't think so.
That did happen with my mother one time when I was young. I was probably like 14. And we were at the grocery store and she was waiting in line at the deli counter to buy some meat for dinner. And we were waiting a really long time. And the lady was gabbing with another lady and then gave her meat. And then this white woman came up next to us. And as that woman walked away with what she had for her hand, the lady at the counter turned to the white woman and said, what can I get for you? And my mom said, excuse me. She said, I've been waiting and you saw me. She goes, I know that you want to help this white woman first, but I was here before she was. And I was like, Mom. And she like said it all, like she said it loud too. So people like snapping those necks and looking and stuff. And the lady's like, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. She said, yeah, you did.
Yeah, you did.
I want this and I want it.
Oh, yeah. And I think that there are days when you let that roll off your back and you just continue on going. And then there are days when you're like, no, I'm going to call you out. You're going to be here. I'm going to mortify you in front of everybody.
In front of everybody, for the whole class.
Because I don't need to put up with it every damn day, in every second of every day.
Yeah. So I think that maybe that's the weight that we're feeling as we've put up with so much. And it's getting kind of old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
especially in this fucking pandemic, when I feel like there's a certain group of white people who have become even more entitled.
And I just want to do a tiny little PSA. If people are wanting to venture out, please be kind to your servers, because you have no idea some of the stuff that we've had to put up with or endure, the money that we've lost, the fear that we've been living in to just freaking get by. So coming back to this, we're very damaged. So please be gentle, be patient.
Tip extra
if you can. I know we're not the only ones hurting out there. You don't know what's happened during our days. Like, I just had somebody throw a bicycle at our window and smash a window at our restaurant. So for the rest of the evening, I was a little blue. So don't take it as bad service. It's just I had to deal with a crazy person. You just don't know what that server has gone through during that day.
Yeah, I always err on the side of like, when I have a bad day, you know, I might piss off a kid or two or whatever. But like, I get to have a bad day. And I think that often we think servers are not allowed to have that. I don't think necessarily people consciously think that. It's like you go to a restaurant and you think it's your moment. It's my day. I'm having a meal out. Like, I don't want to have a bad experience. And I get that. It's a reasonable thing to want. But also, the person serving you your food and drinks are a human being. And they have their own set of life circumstances that are happening around them. So while you might be going out to have dinner because you've had a real bad week and you just want to have one bright spot and you're like, the last thing I need is some shitty server. Well, maybe that shitty server has had a really bad day. Maybe their car broke down and now they're looking at a $2,000 payment that they know they can't make. Or they had a falling out with their boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, their lover, or, you know, like they couldn't make rent. It's like people have shitty days and they're allowed to have shitty days. I always tip no matter what. Unless there was like some extreme problem.
I think I've only like not tipped once in my entire life.
Yeah, I think I've maybe done it like once or twice when it's been something really extreme. But even on shitty service, I still tip 20% because generally I have no idea what's really going on.
Yeah.
You know, you never know. And it's like when in doubt, be kind.
Yep.
That's my philosophy.
And rant. All right. Who do you have today?
I am doing a musician. So you may have heard of this musician because I know that you're well versed in music. Do you know who Melba Liston is?
Melba Liston? No.
Okay. Melba Liston was an American jazz musician, composer, and arranger who was the first woman trombonist to play in big bands.
Oh, heck, I don't know who she is. No.
So I'm going to be including a lot of clips in this because she was a musician. So a lot of what she did and how she worked really can't be described without having some sounds. Plus, I just found some really great stuff. So Melba Liston was born on January 13th, 1926. She grew up an only child in Kansas City, Missouri. She was raised primarily by her mother. There was like nothing about her dad, so I don't know what that situation was like, but she was raised by her mother. It seems that her extended family was in some capacity around and in her life. She had a really close relationship with her grandfather, and he was a musician. I don't think necessarily a professional musician, but he loved to play the guitar, and he played a lot of like spiritual and folk songs.
Just musical, yeah.
Yeah, and they lived in Kansas City, which was a real big hotspot for swing and blues. So there were a ton of musicians around, lots of music all the time. In fact, I read a thing that was like there were more than 100 leading like band leaders in Kansas City.
Oh, wow.
And tons of nightclubs. So when she was in elementary school, her teacher was like, oh, we're going to start a little class band. And her mother took her to get a music instrument. And the first thing she was like goo-goo about was a trombone. She said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. According to her, she laid eyes on a trombone and that was it. That was what she wanted to do. Her mother immediately was like, all right, cool, I'll buy you a trombone, even though she was an adult and knew that trombones and girls were not a thing.
Trombone is a very unique instrument. Yeah.
It really is. I assume most of us know what a trombone is, but if you haven't, imagine like a trumpet. So it's got the horn part of like a trumpet, but it has a slide. Mm-hmm. And playing a trombone is extremely difficult because it's not like any other instrument where you have keys and notes to play that are easily done with various fingerings and things like that. Instead, you have to move the slide in very specific increments in order to make your sounds and your notes. Mm-hmm. When I was did you do band?
I did choir.
I was in band and I played the flute because that was pretty common. Everyone wanted to play the flute or the clarinet and like a couple people played sax, but like brass instruments were actually not the ones that kids gravitated towards when I was younger. And playing the trombone, for a lot of people, to learn would have to like literally take like Sharpie and mark on the metal where the various notes were. Mm-hmm. Because it's not intuitive until after you've memorized those spots.
Yeah.
And even then, it's then very easy to just miss it by a little bit and being sharp or flat. Mm-hmm. So it's a difficult instrument. And it was definitely not an instrument that girls played. But her mom was super supportive, got her trombone lessons. Her teacher was not good. So Melba just started teaching herself how to play the trombone. And she would listen to stuff on the radio, go over to the piano and plunk out the melody and then figure out where it was on the trombone.
Just do it by ear.
It was like a puzzle to her. And she was really smart, very quiet girl. Good at school. Everybody liked her, but she was like just a real shy, quiet girl. She spent a lot of time alone because she was an only child, and that was one of the reasons why she was really drawn to music. It just sort of filled her life. That became her companion. When she was 10, her mom moved them to Los Angeles, and that was in 1937. She continued to play music at school, and also her mom enrolled her in an after-school program that took place at like a park, and it was funded through the Works Progress Administration. Have you ever heard of the WPA? Mm-mm. That was one of those New Deal New Deal programs. So remember way back when I talked about Frances Perkins? Mm-hmm. So she helped, architect a lot of the New Deal. And this is one of the New Deal programs. It was the Works Progress Administration. It put a lot of people to work because unemployment was insane, right? Mm-hmm. And it put people to work building parks and streets and bridges. But also within the Works Progress Administration, they had this whole program that was devoted to the arts.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. Like specifically employing musicians and artists and things of that nature.
Through rebuilding society.
Yes. And just basically putting people to work. Mm-hmm. Like if you had been a working artist before, you were not employed. And now you could get employed. And so that's how she was able to go to this after school program. The woman in charge of it was named Alma Hightower. And Alma sounds like a character. She had a background in vaudeville and theater, and so she would teach these kids that they needed to be an entertainer. So she was starting this like band, right? But they also had to be able to perform skits and dance and sing.
Well, it's entertainment because, I think I've mentioned on this before, but my husband's a musician, mm-hmm. and he has when it's a full band, it's like 11 people. And he does have a brass section, and he'll say, you guys need to move. He's like, nobody wants to see you just staring at your paper. Yeah. Like, get into it and move because we're supposed to entertain.
Yeah, it's an entertaining. So she would have all of the kids, no matter what they were doing. Like, if you were a drummer, you still needed to learn how to sing.
That's really cool.
Because she felt like they needed to be well-rounded, full entertainers. Mm-hmm. And of course, this was the opposite of Melba because she was so shy.
Oh, no.
She loved to play music, but she did not want to be the center of attention. Too bad. They would go around and play this. Their little band was called Miss Hightower and her Melodic Dots. And they would play around LA at parks and fairs and those kinds of things. And so she did that for quite a few years. And then at 16, she graduated high school and joined the Musicians Union.
At 16?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And this was her first time playing as a professional paid musician. She was a trombonist in the pit orchestra of the LA Lincoln Theater, which was a theater that specifically showcased Black artists and musicians. The band leader there saw that she was real talented at arranging music, and he put her to work doing that.
Very cool.
Even for the likes of Louis Armstrong. Like, it's like when artists were coming through to play at the Lincoln Theater, he would have her arrange music for the performance.
Wow.
And she was like, does he think I'm a recent college graduate and not a recent high school graduate? Because he gave her like real big responsibilities. Like, I think her official title was like assistant arranger.
Oh, wow.
And she was 16.
But could she get it done?
She did.
Nice.
So Gerald Wilson, he was an accomplished trumpeter, bandleader, and composer. He saw her and saw all this talent, and he asked her to join his big band after the Lincoln Theater closed. So she's just 17, and now she is in the heart of the jazz scene. He was a big deal in the jazz scene. And imagine being 17 and you're joining a big band.
Yikes.
It's pretty terrifying.
Well, funny side note, the woman that plays saxophone in my husband's band, she now is a teacher in Oregon. She joined his band when she was 16.
Yeah, I remember when I found that out, I was like, what?
Yeah. And her dad was like, told my husband, like, you better take care of my fucking daughter. I am giving her to a Latin band to go play in bars.
Yeah, I love that she was only 16, though. That's
She
great.
quickly became little sister.
So she was just 17 when she starts playing with Gerald Wilson, and she spent about 8 years with him. So like her sort of formative years as a musician are spent with him. And this is how she becomes really proficient at arranging compositions. This is how Melba described her writing process and her musical philosophy. Whenever I wrote something, I always tried to make the lines individually beautiful so the player could put more feeling into it. Even when I was in the school band, I used to not play the trombone part. I played the baritone or the cello or some other part because they had moving lines that I loved. Orchestras are so accustomed to all the reeds playing this way, all the trumpets playing this way, and so when they would get my arrangement, the saxophone might be playing with the trombones, and this one might be playing with the saxes, and this is playing with the trumpets, and the mixture slows things up. Every now and then when I get some kind of funny remarks from the dudes, like, why can't you write like everybody else? But then after they get used to it, they find that they like it very much. And so this is really super unique to have the kind of arrangements that she did. And one guy that I listened to who was on this NPR program that we're going to hear clips from, he said it was the most difficult music he ever played in his life. Her arrangements were.
Well, it's outside the box.
Yes, and it was counterintuitive to the way they all had been taught how to play and had been playing their whole lives. So you'd have these seasoned musicians who'd walk in the room and see her as the arranger, and they'd be like, fuck this shit. And then they would start playing it and realize how hard it was and how difficult it was. And they were like, oh, I guess she can actually do this job. We're actually going to talk about the sexism a lot. So while she was playing with Gerald Wilson, Melba was introduced to some of the all-time jazz greats. She ended up working with Count Basie, Duke Ellington, and it was through Gerald Wilson that she met Dizzy Gillespie. And he immediately was like, I want you in my band.
Cool.
So he asked her to join his big band in New York in 1949. And there she worked alongside, also in his band, John Coltrane and the pianist John Lewis. Unfortunately, this only lasted a few months, this initial job with his band. She got another big break when she was invited to work with Billie Holiday on a tour through the American South.
Oof.
Yeah. But she was completely disillusioned by what she saw when she's doing this tour. She had never really faced anything like this before. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to play a clip from a This is actually an excerpt of a documentary, and we're going to play a clip from the excerpt.
Okay.
And the documentary is called The Girls in the Band, and it is specifically about this all-female group at the time called the International Sweethearts of Rhythm. And it was an integrated all-female jazz band that toured the world in the 1940s.
Very cool.
So another day, I'm going to do at least a mini-sode on the International Sweethearts of Rhythm because this shit is amazing. Imagine an interracial all-female jazz band.
That'd be awesome.
Isn't it incredible?
Sounds awesome.
It's so incredible. So I'm going to play a couple of clips from this excerpt of this documentary. While Melba was never in the International Sweethearts, the International Sweethearts had played at the Lincoln Theater. They knew who she was. She knew who they were. So there was like an overlap there. But the reason why I think this clip is necessary to talk about is because the International Sweethearts also tried to tour in the South, and it didn't go well. So I'm going to let them talk about their experiences, and you can see why it would probably also be problematic for Melba Liston.
The fun lasted until we started doing one-nighters in the South.
While traveling through the South, we'd pull into a service station, and the guy would come out with his gun and say, "We don't have any black toilets. You niggas go out in the field and squat."
The black bands were very good, and they bumped into a lot of problems where they wouldn't be able to work because they were black.
The white world was completely unaware of us because most of our venues all over the country were played in black venues.
They wouldn't stand for us mixing. I was dying to get hold of a girl one time that was a trumpet player, and she was just great. And I wanted to put her in the band, you know. And they said, we can't do it because there are a lot of people that would object to a mixed racial band.
There could be no fraternization between the races, except in a commercial endeavor. But in public, there was no contact of any kind, and everything was segregated.
If we were in a theater, the white folks would be downstairs and the ropes would be dividing the blacks and the whites.
I think that the whole point of jazz has an element of freedom to it. But you cannot avoid the racism. You can't avoid what the effects of it are. And they're devastating because they still serve to divide people.
I was surrounded by the girls with so much love, and yet I knew that I was provoking fear in others. And then so many times I felt so embarrassed for my race, so humiliated by them. I wanted to lash out at them. Those were rough days, rough times, scary times.
Yikes.
That white lady at the end, I just loved her. To be of that era and to recognize that your presence invokes fear in others, that's a pretty, like, woke thing to have.
Yeah.
To have a thought of. Like, you understand that just, like, you felt love from them, but you understood inherently that your presence was scary. And also that she was embarrassed for her race.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, we've got some wokeness there of this old white lady.
Some serious understanding, yeah.
So as you can hear from that clip, not great. That one black woman who talked about when they got off the bus to go to the bathroom at a gas station, she was told to squat behind the building. So disrespectful. So after this experience, Melba is completely disillusioned. In fact, she abandoned the tour in the middle.
Yikes.
And got stranded in South Carolina for a little while, and it was very unpleasant. So she decided after this that she was, after like all the sexism that people were like, what are you doing arranging music? What are you doing playing the trombone? And then all of this racism that she experienced while, traveling in the South, she was like, fuck it, I'm leaving music.
Wow.
So she took a job with the Los Angeles Board of Education in 1950. She also appeared in a couple bit parts in movies at the time, and one of them was with Lana Turner.
I love Lana Turner.
And she followed Lana Turner around in the movie playing the harp. I can't remember the name of the movie, but if you've seen it, you'll know what I'm talking about. But she couldn't stay away from music for very long. When Dizzy Gillespie came calling again in 1956, she jumped at the chance to join his band again. The U.S. State Department had asked Gillespie to put together a band to do a couple of state tours, which was a thing they were doing at the time to promote diplomacy. It's what we call soft diplomacy.
Okay.
So they wanted him to get a band together and go play music in the Middle East.
Wow.
And it would be funded by the State Department.
Mm-hmm.
And Melba Liston was basically one of the first people on his list. But he was, at the time when he was trying to get this band together, he was actually touring in Europe. And so he was calling all these musicians to come together in New York, but he wasn't going to be there to start rehearsals with them.
Okay.
So he put Quincy Jones in charge. I'm sure you've heard of him.
I've heard of Quincy Jones.
When Melba arrived, the reaction from the other members of the band, who were all male, of course, was not great. This is a literal quote.
Oh, no.
Why the hell did he send all the way to California for a bitch trombone player?
Yikes.
As soon as they started playing her arrangements, though, they figured it out.
Yeah.
They then started calling her mama instead of bitch, which I'm not sure I love.
Okay. You could call her name.
Yeah, you could just call her Melba or sis.
Yeah.
Mama is I don't know. There's something even worse about that. And not worse, but it's just equally not great.
Yeah.
The tour took Melba throughout the Middle East. They traveled to Iran, Lebanon, Pakistan, Syria, Greece, and Turkey. Melba was loved by the women there, especially, who were like, oh my gosh, you're traveling unaccompanied with a bunch of men? And she actually ended up going on another State Department tour with Dizzy Gillespie a few years later, and that one went throughout South America. So she got to see a lot of the world.
That's really cool.
And she loved doing these international tours. However, touring for a woman who was in an entirely male band really sucked.
Yeah, I've been in a van with musicians before, and it's not always great.
Yeah, and this is the 50s. So it's an incredibly sexist time. And she talked about there were what she called the natural problems on the road, female menstruation and whatever. Mm-hmm. She called them female problems. But also she said there were lodging problems, laundry, and all those kind of things to try to keep yourself together. The problems that show that other guys don't seem to have to go through. But you're on your own out there. If you're going to be in the band, you must be self-sufficient. And the only way I could survive is that I was young and I was strong then. I showed them that I was not going to be a burden to them. So you know that she had to go above and beyond.
Oh, yeah. Twice as much work.
Yeah, twice as much work for
probably not getting the same pay.
She was definitely not. She barely got paid. Mm-hmm. She always got paid less than the male musicians, even though she was more accomplished. Logistics were also not the only obstacles that she faced. So we have the logistical stuff that I was talking about, like laundry and lodging and having your period on tour.
Your hygiene even.
Yeah.
Your hair, your
everything.
All of it.
That was not the only problem that she was up against when touring with men. So I'm going to do a little content warning for sexual violence. Melba was sexually assaulted so often and with such frequency that she was nonchalant about it. This is a quote from her in 1998. Rapes and everything. I've been going through that stuff all my life. When I started going with Gerald, I was okay because I had support. But when I left in 55 and I went back to Dizzy's band, it was the same thing all over again. Yeah, well, it's a broad and she's by herself. That's that. But the older I get, the less it happened. Laughter. I don't know how old I was, but it stopped altogether.
Yikes. So just repeatedly raped.
Yeah.
Okay.
And since she said, when I was with Gerald, I was okay. You remember when she hooked up with Gerald?
Mm-hmm.
It was when she was 17. So that means prior to that, she'd been raped.
Wow.
And then after that, when she started touring with Dizzy's band, she was raped. Repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
It was such frequency that she doesn't even remember how old she was when it stopped.
Wow.
And like I said, laughter, because it's like literally she laughed about it.
That's crazy.
I can't even fathom being so cavalier about sexual assaults that I had experienced that I could just kind of laugh them off.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that was a survival technique for her.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things when she was talking about being young and strong. I think she was talking about like fighting men off.
Mm-hmm.
Literally fighting.
Jeez.
So I was a little taken aback by that, and I really wanted to include it because I think that it paints a pretty stark picture of what kind of terrible, like what she had to go through to even get the credit that she has.
Mm-hmm.
So in between those two tours, the one to the Middle East and the one to South America, Melba wrote, arranged, and recorded the only solo album of her career. It was called Melba Liston and Her Bones. And the album was well received by critics and other musicians. They were all like, this is a great album. And it had an all-star list of players, like some of the best players of the day. And it was not a commercial success. So people like John Coltrane put out a solo album, highly successful.
Mm-hmm.
Dizzy Gillespie, highly successful. Quincy Jones, highly successful. She's in their league. She's been in their league. But her album didn't sell. This lack of commercial success has been obviously discussed by musicians and scholars since then to now. And most agree that the logical reason for the lack of sales was due to sexism.
Oh, yeah.
That women jazz musicians were expected to be singers or pianists. So you could be an Ella Fitzgerald, but you couldn't be a Melba Liston.
Yeah.
They could not be brass players or arrangers. So I'm going to play a couple of clips that really highlight what the culture was saying about female musicians and what they were allowed to do and sort of not allowed to do. So I'm going to play a couple in succession. Two of these clips are going to be from this documentary that I talked about earlier, The Girls in the Band. And then another one is going to be specifically about Melba and her album. And that it's going to be from a 2008 profile of her on NPR.
All the guys were scared of Mary Lou and Melba. And I can see why they would be. Those women knew what they were doing and they knew how to play and they were tough.
The guys can have white hair and glasses and weigh 300 pounds, but if they can play, great. The girls, they want to look like a bunch of young starlets.
Now when you pick your chicks, you pick them big and fat. You can bet your booze that it's tight like that.
You had to have girls who think more about how they looked than how they played.
Guys just didn't want chicks on their bandstands.
A bunch of women in the world trying to make their place in the world among musicians where prejudice existed because they were women.
So that first clip is really illustrating what men were allowed to look like and get away with and what women were supposed to look like.
I think it still pertains to the music industry today.
Talk about the imagery though. What did you just see?
The women definitely have to be glamorous, glitzed out, perfect hair, makeup, silk dresses. These guys look like maybe they haven't showered in a couple days.
Yeah, there were some men I was like, did you just roll out of bed? What are you doing?
Like their suit shirts weren't even pressed or anything like that.
And these women were dressed to the nines. Hair, makeup, gowns, like they're gorgeous. But they're playing the saxophone and sitting down.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna The next two are going to be specifically about piano playing.
Okay.
So this first clip is going to be from the same documentary about the expectation, and then the next one is going to expound upon the piano playing. And I think that's really important to talk about why Melba Liston's album didn't sell.
As long as a woman is sitting at a piano or sitting at an organ, it feels like you're relegated to a lesser position, but not so when you stand side by side with a man in jazz. You stand up and you do your solo, and you stand up and you stand right with him on the equal plane. It's often been more feminine for a woman to be a singer-entertainer type. The cutie pie lady. I think it was more acceptable than having a woman playing an instrument.
Just the fact that it's the physical even divide that they want to portray of you sit while he gets to stand.
I thought that was really astute to be like, it's literally you're below. Mm-hmm. Literally you are sitting down, and so therefore you are like diminutive, you're in your place. Mm-hmm. You're below us. And I thought that might be a little bit of an exaggeration. So the next clip I'm going to show you is a clip of a woman who is not Melba on a talk show, like a television talk show. She's the musical guest. And you're going to see the male host embody what this woman has just said.
Oh, no.
Physical standpoint, it would seem that women in music do best when they play the piano. And this is probably because it takes less physical effort to play the piano than, say, a wind instrument, or for that matter, the drums. And to prove how right Duke is, here is Marianne McPartland right now playing I Could Write a Book.
People used to pay me a compliment they thought it was. She plays just like a man.
Honestly, did you consider that you're working under a handicap to try to make a profession of being a jazz pianist as a woman?
Well, it has never been a handicap, Gene, truly, and I really don't think about it. I just think of myself as a musician working with other musicians.
So we're handicapped? I'm handicapped now? Oh, okay.
It makes sense that women play the piano because it's not as physically demanding as playing a wood instrument.
Because women are so fucking fragile.
And so dainty.
So dainty.
I mean, she answered that question with a lot of grace.
Oh, yeah.
I think I would have punched him.
Because they have to.
Yeah, they have to.
They have to.
Mm-hmm. She would never get another job if she said what she really thought.
Yeah.
I thought, because again, when that other woman is talking about Melba's album didn't sell well because she didn't sit down and play the piano and wasn't a submissive little, small girl. Mm-hmm. She stood up and played a fucking trombone. And I was like, is it really that bad? And then I watched that clip and I thought,
wow.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really that bad. So, moving on. While playing with Dizzy's band, obviously had its setbacks for her with the sexism and the racism that she faced. One of the bright spots was that she met a pianist named Randy Weston. And when Randy saw her play for the first time, he was blown away. I want to just play a clip of him describing the moment because it also is a clip that will feature her trombone solo. So this is going to be just her playing when you hear the clip start.
I looked up there and I saw this beautiful woman with this trombone. I said, who is that? And the first piece I heard Melba play was My Reverie. And she wrote the arrangements. And she was featured on trombone. And for me, it was incredible. Number one, I never heard a woman play a trombone before. Not to mention jazz trombone, but she had this big sound.
beautiful, robust playing.
Very, yeah.
So I wanted to play the clip where Randy Weston talks about meeting her for the first time because this is the most substantial and important relationship professionally that will carry on through the rest of her life. So Randy and Melba become partners in music. I'm not sure that they were anything other than that, but for many, many years, they created some of the best work of both of their careers. Randy composed, Melba arranged, and they created monumental works in the jazz world. Most notably, an album called Uhura Africa, which infused African beats with blues and jazz.
Very cool.
Also featured on that album was one, I don't know if you've heard of him, Langston Hughes.
Yes.
Langston Hughes wrote some of the lyrics and the liner notes of this album.
Very cool.
So it was a really big album.
Yeah.
Melba also began to see the need for making sure that music, and jazz in particular, was being promoted among young musicians and young adults. So in 1964, she helped establish the Pittsburgh Jazz Orchestra. She taught jazz music to kids in Harlem and established the Youth in Action Orchestra in Brooklyn. When she returned to Los Angeles, she did the same there, teaching jazz to kids in the Watts projects. Melba was a hot commodity in the music world. Everyone wanted her to come work for them, to play on their albums. Her credits are extensive.
Nice.
Like 40, 50 albums.
Oh my God.
Only one of hers is her own. The rest of them, she's a player, an arranger, whatever on there. In fact, she was hired by Motown Records and Stax Records, both of which were really big black records, like black music records. And she was hired to arrange and conduct music for some of their biggest stars, like Marvin Gaye, Diana Ross, The Supremes, and many more. She worked with Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Quincy Jones. Basically, if you've heard of them, she worked with them.
Yeah.
In 1974, Melba Liston was afforded an incredible opportunity. The government of Jamaica called her, and they invited her to establish the African American Music Division of the Jamaica School of Music.
Oh, wow.
Which was part of the University of the West Indies. For 5.5 years, Melba worked in Jamaica teaching children and college students about jazz and music fundamentals.
That's amazing.
Yes. I was like, what? A whole ass country called you?
That's pretty freaking amazing.
She said this at the time. When I first started here, we averaged about 40 students. Today, we average about 80 students. We're growing by leaps and bounds. And that was like literally while she was in Jamaica and she got interviewed by Ebony magazine.
Oh, wow.
In Jamaica, Melba Liston was really happy, even working with reggae superstar Bob Marley. And she was composing and arranging music for a comedy film called Smile Orange. And no doubt she was comfortable because she was working in an almost exclusively black country. And I have to assume that was pleasant after having grown up in the States.
Such an experience that almost made her give up on her passion.
I obviously have no idea what it's like to walk into places or live in a world that, you know, I don't see people, like I always see people who look like me. And the only experience I can even kind of relate it to is when I went to Los Angeles and was chosen to be one of the emerging writers for the Lambda Literary Emerging Writers retreat. And I had never in my life been surrounded by only queer people. Ever, right?
Yeah.
And so literally everyone that I interacted with all day, every day was queer. And it was like almost a religious experience. There was one night that I just burst into tears because it just was like so revelatory. So having experienced that, I can imagine that was something that she experienced.
It's like when I went to Mexico for the first time and everybody looked like me. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, there's no white people here.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what that's like, but having been in this experience where I was like, everyone around me is queer. What? It's wild. So she returned to the United States when she was asked to perform at the Kansas City Women's Jazz Festival. So it's kind of full circle.
Yeah, I was going to say, back to Casey.
Melba also decided at that point to put together an all-female jazz ensemble.
Good.
And she called them Melba Liston and Company. After the festival, her band, her company, toured Europe, and they did another tour in Asia in 1980. However, Melba had some internal sexism. She made this comment to the New York Times, a couple of comments to the New York Times about how difficult it was to work with women. I found really interesting. She said that they like, sometimes they would show up and they'd be like, I'm pregnant. She'd have to like replace them. She said she felt like some of them just wanted to play music for fun and then go have a cocktail in the cocktail bar. But she was like a touring working musician. And she said that she thought there were plenty of women who were not prepared and found the tour life too grueling.
I bet too she's also very, she's probably steel, tough as nails at this point, and being able to see people that have not even tasted a little bit of what she had to endure or go through and have the privilege of being there probably would piss her off a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, some of the women who were in music at the same time as her were married to male musicians. She was not married. She didn't have children. So I also think that she was blinded by her own lack of experience in that regard. She didn't know what it was like to also be accountable to another person. She only had to live for herself. And so what she saw as weakness is not necessarily weakness. It's just they
are more than just the music.
Yeah. You have a life.
They have the other side of them. Yeah.
So she did talk about that kind of stuff. The band broke up in 1983. And shortly after that, in 1985, Melba had a massive stroke. Oof. And it left her wheelchair bound and paralyzed on one half of her body. This would have put many folks out of music altogether. After all, she no longer could hold a trombone. She couldn't write notes on a page. But then her old friend Randy Weston came calling.
She was in the wheelchair, paralyzed on one side, been doing nothing. And I almost insulted her. Almost. I said, you got to do this. And nobody else on the planet Earth can do these arrangements but you. Stroke or no stroke. Well, this great woman and her great aunt, Thelma, who's a computer specialist, taught her how to use a computer. And she started writing the music with her left hand.
My right side was all messed up, and so I had to do it or else quit writing. And I don't know a lot about the computer yet. I just know how to get my notes out. That's all. But I can do the notes, and that's all I'm interested in.
And she did the arrangements of Spirits for Our Ancestors, which was a tremendous recording, certainly a classic of my recordings.
Interesting. Wow, using a computer.
Wow, right?
Yeah.
She learned how to use a computer, learned how to write with her left hand, and then continued on arranging music.
Jeez.
Yeah. I was like...
No excuses there, man.
Well, I mean... It is a great excuse. She's superhuman is what I think.
Yeah.
Later in that same interview, he described how she was working with the musicians and they were, working on her composition that she'd arranged. I want to make clear what an arranger does. They don't write the music. They take the music and they sometimes write the parts for individual pieces of the orchestra. So the music itself has already been written. She's just writing the melody notes and arranging them and deciding like, when do the trombones come in? When do the saxophones come in? And so on and so forth. So that's like her whole job. And that's a really hard job. And so she's usually the one conducting too. Like that's what the arranger often does is they conduct the band. And so she's there when they're rehearsing and there's a section of the music that they're just not getting. They're not playing it the way that she thinks it needs to be played. And so she like used her body and moved her body, the half of the body that she could move, in such a way that actually was able to illustrate to them how it should sound. And they were able to play it right. In 1987, she was awarded the Jazz Masters Fellowship of the National Endowment for the Arts. Melba continued to work with Randy Weston and various orchestras up until 1998.
Jeez.
In 1999, she suffered a series of strokes and died on April 23rd. Melba Liston was one of the finest jazz musicians, composers, and arrangers at the height of the big band era, and worked with some of the most well-known musicians of the time, including Dizzy Gillespie, John Coltrane, Quincy Jones, Ray Charles, Count Basie, Ella Fitzgerald. I could go on.
Mm-hmm.
All of whom are household names, even for people who don't listen to jazz.
Oh,
or
absolutely.
big band, which was me. I would count myself among them. My wife listens to jazz, so I started listening to jazz by proxy.
Mm-hmm.
But jazz has never been a thing that I had naturally been drawn to. But even I could tell you those names.
Mm-hmm.
I knew who they were. I could even probably pick a lot of them out in a lineup.
I was going to say, yeah, I probably recognize photos.
I would be like, oh, that's Dizzy Gillespie. Oh, that's Duke Ellington. And I don't know who Melba Liston is.
Mm-hmm.
But she was the same. She was on the same level as them. She created the music that they made. The music that they recorded wouldn't exist without her arranging it. So I think it's just as important that she become as revered as those other musicians. Just because she's a woman doesn't mean she shouldn't have the same place as they do.
Yeah.
So from here on out, I want everybody to tell their friends about Melba Liston and her contributions to jazz music. Because again, the albums of people like Dizzy Gillespie and Quincy Jones would not exist without Melba Liston. And that's the story of Melba Liston.
That is awesome.
So I got a lot of sources here. I read a long article in the Antioch Review that I based a lot of my research on. It's called Melba Liston, It's All from the Soul by Erica Kaplan. It was actually written just before she died.
Oh.
So they had to add a note at the end that she had just died. And the radio clips you heard, those are from NPR's Profiles in Jazz. The one that she's on is called Melba Liston, Bones of an Arranger, which I love that title. I also mentioned the Girls in the Band documentary. You can get the whole documentary on Amazon Prime. You have to pay for it, but it's there. And they also have a website for that documentary called girlsintheband.com, and there's a bio of Melba Liston on there that I used. I also took an excerpt from Dizzy Gillespie's biography, which was called To Be or Not to Bop. And a New York Times, an article from the archives from 1980 called Melba Liston Returns with Horns and Baton. A really fascinating academic article that was from an entire journal issue on Melba Liston. Every article in the journal is about her.
Wow.
It's called the Black Music Research Journal. It was on a specific issue that year. I think it was issue 34. And it's called Melba Liston, Renaissance Woman by Emmett G. Price III. And of course, I used some Wikipedia for dates.
Mm-hmm. That was excellent.
Yeah, I hope you all go out and listen to her. That radio, the profile of her, it's 53 minutes long, but the majority of it is music. Mm-hmm. And so I highly recommend it. There's an incredible rendition of Over the Rainbow on it that she arranged.
It's impressive how extensive her career was too, and how she didn't stop, because my whole life I've been around musicians. I'm married to one. My father is one. My grandfather was one. And we have a lot of friends that are musicians. And it is, when you're on that stage, and I myself have been a performer, it's like everybody's like, oh my God, it's so amazing. And it looks like so much fun. There's so much shit that happens behind the scenes internally that people don't see is really crappy. And so to be able to stick with it for that long, especially through her physical ailments, and not stop, is impressive.
I really found her that perseverance, that grit, impressive and remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's necessarily like that's not something I would necessarily strive for. Like at some point you can rest.
Yeah.
But I don't think she liked rest. I think that, you know, when Randy Weston came calling and said, I want you to arrange some more, I don't care if you've had a stroke.
Mm-hmm. She was like, all right.
And you know what's funny is that none of the clips that I shared had her saltier language, but she was not afraid of dropping an F-bomb. You know, and, you know, she talked about them calling her a bitch, and she was like, yeah, motherfucker, you get it.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I thought she was great and fun and funny and really interesting. You know, I also found this New York Times article that was from the 60s that was about her, and they described what she looked like and how she had her hair cropped close, and the only way you could really tell she was a woman is if you were like close to her because she was wearing earrings. And I was like, this is so weird. Why would you even have to write this?
Yeah.
It was so,
it
it's
doesn't
so strange.
add anything.
That's why I didn't include it in my list of sources. I read it,
Mm-hmm.
but I was like, nah, this is weird.
Mm-hmm.
Why does it matter? And it was really all about like, how does a woman play a trombone?
Oh my gosh. How does she do it?
How can it even? And actually, there's a really funny thing about when she first started playing the trombone as a little girl, because she was like 8 when she started playing it. She was so small that her arms couldn't actually reach the 6th and 7th position. So she had to like tilt her head to the side and like move away from the, like, to be able to actually move the slide long enough.
Jeez.
Because she's too small. It's so cute. I grew up with, my band director was a jazz trombonist, and he was a big deal. It was a big deal to him.
Mm-hmm.
Trombones were a big deal to him. Jazz is a big deal to him. And I credit him for me having any knowledge whatsoever of jazz when I was younger, because he was really into it. And we had a jazz band at our school that he ran. And they were like an award-winning jazz band, really big jazz band. And he had always wanted me to come play the piano for the jazz band. He asked me every year, and I always turned him down because I was like, jazz band is dumb. And now I regret it.
Oh, no.
And I want to go back in time and be like, go play piano for the jazz band.
Nick is actually working on a recording project that he's going to be doing this year with Steve Berlin. He's the saxophone player for Los Lobos.
Ooh.
Yeah. And he's inviting a friend, Manny Gonzalez. He was in the Heights.
So lots of real good people there.
Real good singers. Yeah, I'm excited.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed it, our like little musical interlude today.
It was fantastic. Love it.
Thank you to Lucas McIntyre for editing this one together, because it's going to be a little bit extra work for him.
And we'd like to thank also another musical influence of ours, Jennifer Finch from L7, for our wonderful theme song.
And in fact, I forgot to tell you last week, I talked about how we're blocked in Cuba, Iran, and Syria. North Korea. I forgot to add Syria. We're also blocked in Syria.
Check.
Okay. And thank you everyone who is supporting us. We've gotten a couple extra Patreons, and we also have some TeePublic stuff coming our way. So we really appreciate your support. Continue to do that. Our link tree is in our show notes. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter.
Alrighty, till next time, folks.
See ya.
Bye.